Guy Ritchie and Jake Gyllenhaal are both back. I got a chance to see The Covenant this past weekend. Here's my full review of the movie without going into any spoilers. Guy Ritchie's returning to movie theater screens just a month after Operation Fortune hit theaters here in America, and Jake Gyllenhaal's trying to bounce back after a pretty lackluster 2022. While I really enjoyed Ambulance, a lot of people didn't. And then he was also a part of Disney's animated movie Strange World, which was the biggest flop of 2022. I've never been the biggest Guy Ritchie fan, admittedly. I think all of his movies are just run-of-the-mill, pretty average in terms of where I end up rating them, but Jake Gyllenhaal is my favorite actor of all time. And from the trailer of this movie, I thought this looked like it was going to be the least Guy Ritchie movie out there, which in some respects is true, but in large chunks, it still falls into the same type of dialogue that Guy Ritchie is known for. Before I get into my thoughts, here's the quick synopsis of what the movie's about. Guy Ritchie's The Covenant is a military movie that takes place after an ambush where Afghan interpreter Ahmed goes to Herculean efforts to save U.S. Army Sergeant John Kinley's life, who's played by Jake Gyllenhaal. When Kinley learns that Ahmed and his family were not given safe passage to America as promised, he must repay his debt by returning to the war zone to retrieve them before the Taliban hunt them down. Now, this movie's 2 hours long, and based on the synopsis and the trailer, I got a movie that's quite different than what I was expecting it. This movie moved pretty slow. I thought most of this movie is going to be Jake Gyllenhaal's rescue efforts trying to save Ahmed. However, most of this movie, like the first 90 minutes or so, is just them working together, getting in that sticky situation where Ahmed has to save Jake Gyllenhaal's life. And I feel like the resolution of them going to save Ahmed was a lot quicker than I was expecting. Now, like I just mentioned, I think this movie takes a while to get going. I think the first 30 minutes legitimately could just be scrapped, could be cut from this entire movie. If you know Guy Ritchie from movies like Sherlock Holmes, Snatch, The Gentleman, Operation Fortune, you know that it's usually like action-packed, thriller-esque, but with a lot of comedic, quirky dialogue mixed in, threading the narrative together. And that's exactly what you get here for that first 30 minutes. You get that same old dialogue that when I'm listening to, I can literally hear Jason Statham's voice saying these, except you get Jake Gyllenhaal and Salim and the rest of the cast delivering this dialogue. And as much as I love Jake Gyllenhaal, I don't think he's the best comedic actor, nor do I think anyone in this cast was really able to deliver on that signature Guy Ritchie style dialogue. And that's what most of this first 30 minutes was. There was a couple more scenes spliced throughout the film where it had that typical witty banter back and forth that was a little quirky, and I just didn't think any of this cast was really capable of nailing it. Now, talking about the cast a little more, after that bumpy first 30 minutes, I think Jake Gyllenhaal delivers a solid performance. I don't think it's nowhere near any of his greatest roles. And then Gyllenhaal's counterpart, Salim, who plays Ahmed, I think he is pretty solid as well. However, there's a couple emotional scenes that he tries to deliver that I don't think he really nails, and I think it's a little awkward how he plays them. But outside of those two, which are clearly the main roles in this cast, the rest of the cast ranges from not that great to really bad, in my opinion. And then we have Anthony Starr, who is leaked like, oh, look, first look at Anthony Starr in Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. He's in this movie not until probably 20 minutes left, and in those 20 minutes remaining, he's in like legitimately 2 minutes of this movie. He is barely in this film. And I think another issue I have with this film is this just isn't the most cinematic story to tell. It is based on a true story, and it's about this rescue effort where first Ahmed saves Jake Gyllenhaal's life by dragging him through the Afghan desert for miles and miles, days and days, tirelessly dragging him across the country, trying to get him to safety. And then ultimately Jake Gyllenhaal going back, trying to do that rescue effort to get Ahmed and his family out and bring them safely back to America. So a lot of this movie is long walks across the desert, long drives across the desert. This story is a heartfelt, emotional, incredible story. I just don't think it's the best to translate to the movie screen. However, I will say the action sequences there are between the army where they're fighting the Taliban, they're brilliantly shot. I think the cinematography is beautiful throughout this entire film, but first and foremost, the musical score I think is incredible. As I'm talking right now, I have the songs and the music and the score going in my head right now, bouncing around. Beautiful, beautiful score. I just think this movie's a mixed bag, and it tries to be Guy Ritchie's most grounded and real film yet, and I was excited to see that because a lot of his witty banter isn't exactly my cup of tea. I know a lot of people love it, however, not really my cup of tea, but we didn't really get that hyper-realism I was expecting. We get it in large chunks. Probably an hour of this movie feel hyper-real, grounded, dramatic, and the other hour has a lot of dialogue, a lot of kind of awkward emotional scenes. I don't know, I just felt like this was kind of a mess in terms of how they piece it together. The movie starts with the classic historical biopic exposition of saying this is how many troops entered Afghanistan as a result of 9/11, this is how many troops were there 10 years later, this is what year it is now. You start with an initial scene that sets the stage and kind of kicks off the conflict, but then it kind of jumps to something else, and then you get 30 minutes of just kind of setup and build up and dialogue. I felt like the first hour of this movie was really, really messy. And then the final 30 minutes or so I thought were really, really rushed. I feel like we had this slow burn of a movie with long, waning shots and scenes across the desert, and then it all got tied up so fast. And with any war film and any historical film, you know there's going to be a lot of liberties taken in terms of how true the story is, but there's a lot of sequences, especially the final one, where you really have to suspend your disbelief to think it actually went down that way. But I'm not taking anything away from The Covenant as a result of that, because I think anytime you're watching a historical film or a war film, like I said, you kind of just have to suspend your disbelief. The bottom line here is I think Jake Gyllenhaal and Salim, who are the two main characters in this movie that you see for 99% of the screen time, deliver pretty solid performances, but I think the rest of the cast deliver quite mediocre performances. The cinematography, not only in the action sequences, but every single shot of this movie, I think looks beautiful. I think the musical score is gorgeous. So in terms of the main two characters, the cast, it was good. There was a lot of technical aspects that were great, but I think as a whole, this movie was kind of a mess for how it was pieced together for the final cut. My final score for this movie is 5.9 out of 10 for 3 stars. This might be a little bias bump for me personally, giving it a 3-star because I love Jake Gyllenhaal. However, I think this movie is quite messy and there's a lot of problems I had with it, and it really took me a long time to get into this movie, like 40 minutes or so before I finally settled in. However, I will say at my screening, which was sold out, there was a standing ovation, round of applause at the end of the movie, so maybe I'm just a hater on it. Letterboxd at the time of this video has not published the reviews yet, so I have no clue what other people think of this movie. This is just my own thoughts right now. Though I will preface it with the people that were standing and giving the round of applause tended to be more the dad type energy, you know, the type that would love just like a US Army war flick. I just think there's a lot of messy points with this one. I'm mixed on it. I wasn't planning on making this review on YouTube, but I just had so much going in my head about this, and I just thought it could be so much better if it was pieced together a little better, if it was tightened up to 1 hour 30 instead of 2 hours, or that 2 hours was used a little more smarter and just kind of cut a little bit at the beginning, gave us a little more at the end. Yeah. Mixed bag on The Covenant. Jake Gyllenhaal, I still haven't just seen that performance from him lately where I'm just like, yes, he is back to, you know, the early 2010s when he was delivering Southpaw, Prisoners, Nightcrawler, back to back to back, Jake Gyllenhaal bangers, Enemy. I'm just waiting to see that Jake Gyllenhaal to come out again. He's still my favorite actor, but The Covenant just wasn't quite it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I post videos every single Tuesday and Friday. On Friday this week, I'm going to be posting my full review of Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid. I've not seen it yet. I'm going in 2 days, so I'm very, very excited. Well, at the time of you watching this, I probably will have already seen it. But I'm very excited based on the mixed early reactions, so hit that subscribe button. Comment down below your favorite Jake Gyllenhaal movie. If you're going to be going to see The Covenant, hit that like button, and I will see you on Friday with the review of Beau is Afraid.